about intimacy with God. And you've probably heard people talk about that, and it's a sort of become a tiny bit of a cliche in the Christian world. But I hope I'm going to be able to bring you something that you haven't heard before. So let's see how we get on. And the reason is that intimacy is the bedrock of the prophetic. And here's why. So you can sort of tell who you're intimate with in the natural by looking at who you tell the most important things in your life to, the things that really matter to you, and also the people that tell you those things back again. So I was thinking about this. There are some sort of exceptions to this kind of stuff. The reciprocality of this is important. So you might tell your pastor or your therapist very intimate things, but that doesn't make you intimate. It's only when they tell you the same things back again that you become intimate. And if they do start telling you the same things back again, you probably just need to check their boundaries, you know. Sorry, I can see this is going to descend into chaos, this talk. But anyway, never mind. Victorians used to talk to people as their intimate friend. It was an expression. And it didn't mean, you know, they got up to hanky-panky. That's a Victorian phrase as well, but you can guess what it means. It was the person with whom they had a kind of heart connection. You know, I have intimate friends that I don't see very often, but they're still intimate friends. Do you know what I mean? Because when I do see them or talk to them, we immediately connect and we talk about things that really matter. And I think having intimate friends is one of the greatest pleasures in life. It's just such a lovely thing to find. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. So in the last session we were talking about dreams. And just as I was talking about how the world and the flesh and the devil oppose our dreams, they also oppose intimacy. So the main thing that the enemy does is tries to replace our love for God with love for things that are unworthy of love. And God gives us our love as a spiritual gift that we can choose to bestow on whoever or whatever we choose to bestow it on. But when we bestow our love on someone or something, it opens up a channel of communication, if you like. Maybe I should say communion into our souls and spirits. And the order in which we're designed is for that love first to go to God, then to go to people, and after that to God's creation. And God has given us, there are many aspects to love. So in Greek there are 6 words, I think. I was joking with someone in the office this morning about how one of the 6 Greek words is pragma, from which we get pragmatism. Which is like, you don't think of that as a form of love much, do you? It means kind of steadfast love. So some of the others you'll be familiar with are philia, which is kind of friendship type, warm, fuzzy kind of stuff. Agape, self-sacrificial love, which is the word. Actually, I'm going to introduce you to this. It's important. Agape was the word I don't know if you know the history of the Hebrew Bible, but it was when Greek became the standard language of the Middle East after Alexander. So Alexander the Great conquered, I'm sorry, I've suddenly switched gears here, but just go with me for a second. Alexander the Great conquered from Greece all the way through to Afghanistan, and in fact right through to India, and the other way all through Egypt and a bit of North Africa. And vast empire, and so Greek became the sort of standard language, and you'll find people called Alexander all over that area, all called some derivative of that. Why am I telling you this? Oh yes, because because everybody then spoke Greek, it became important to have the Hebrew Bible available in Greek. So in about 250 BC, 70 scholars sat down in Egypt and translated the Hebrew Bible into Greek, and it's called the Septuagint after the 70 scholars who did it. And they were faced with a number of conundrums in the translation, one of which was, how do we translate the Hebrew word, ahava, which means love? Hebrew only has one word for love. How do we translate this into Greek? So they had to choose. And they had 6 words to choose from. And they ended up choosing agape, which is why, you've heard people talk about it in church and da-da-da-da. But it's not inclusive. See, the Hebrew idea of love includes all kinds of other things. And most, rather nice sort of bell noises. The thing that I want to talk to you about this afternoon is eros. Okay? So eros is, they couldn't use the word eros because eros was a Greek god for a start, which made it impossible. And also it had sort of slightly sexual overtones, but that wasn't its main. The main idea of eros is that it's passionate and it's kind of slightly out of control. And the Greeks were a bit frightened of this, but it's a really important idea, and I think the Song of Songs expresses it very well in this verse. It says, as strong as death, this is love, as strong as death, unyielding as the grave, it burns like a blazing fire, like a mighty flame. Many waters cannot quench love, rivers cannot sweep it away. Well, that's not agape, is it? Okay? So, in the last session I was talking to you a little bit about how I got introduced to the Song of Songs very early on in my Christian life. And I kind of always knew there was something special about. I seem to have experienced it in ways that were different from when I talk to other people. They kind of looked at me blankly as if to say, I have no idea what you're talking about. Or worse, if you talk to kind of pastors who'd been educated theologically, they'd say, no, you've got completely the wrong end of the stick here. It's not about that at all. It's about marriage and sex and things. Sorry, I went off on a bit of a tangent there, but I'm going to come back to that actually. So I was talking about being intimate with people and about the prophetic. And I was talking about how the person, we can tell who we're intimate with by who we share the most important things with. And the connection is that those most important things are the things that can hurt us when we share them and they're wrongly received, wrongly understood. We get hurt when we say those things because those are our precious things. We give access when we share those things. We give access to other people, to our holy of holies, if you like, to the very center of our souls. And as we know, God also has an inner sanctuary. Did you know that he also can be hurt? It says, don't grieve the Holy Spirit. And so he too has to be careful what he shares with who. Because intimate revelations carry a certain weight. maybe you've had this happen to you. People share things with you that are inappropriately weighty, and you can't. You sort of feel uncomfortable because they've told you things that really you're not quite in that relationship to hear. So God is careful with what he shares with who, which is why the intimacy is connected with the prophetic. Do you get this? So the more intimate we become with God, the more he can share with us, because it's a normal, reciprocal, intimate relationship. He never shares things with us that are too much for us, because he cares about us. Have you ever wondered why it was to John that the book of Revelation was given? Because he was the disciple that Jesus loved. And he was the one who, you remember that verse about how John was leaning on Jesus' breast. Although if you look in the NIV, it says something completely different, I discovered the other day. But anyway, don't worry about that. Grouse is about translations. It's probably an Instagram account, isn't it? Interestingly, the word that John uses for leaning is the same word as the author of the song uses for who is this coming up from the desert leaning on her beloved. For a reason. Something special happens to us in the safe place of intimacy. It's, we were talking about the compass before. It's when we experience in our hearts, I'm not saying we can be talking with someone, it can be loud and noisy outside, but when we feel that stillness and safety and quietness in our hearts, that we can sense and feel God's voice in the prophetic. I would say, if there's anything I would say to you about learning how to prophesy, it's learning how to find peace in front of people. When someone's asking for a word or whatever, it's learning how to find that place of peace and overcome your fears and anxieties that you're going to say something stupid or it's just going to miss completely or whatever. So for me, all this is tied back to the Song of Songs. So let me just So I was telling you a bit about my story, and part of this was to do with I had this experience with it back here, and then I started to kind of re-engage with it, and actually I was the person that basically for years and years I couldn't find anyone who actually genuinely believed that it was about us and Jesus rather than it was about, and if you read pretty much all modern commentaries, they all tell you it's about marriage and sex, and that's the other interpretation is nonsense. Are you familiar with the song? It's a small book. It's between Ecclesiastes and Isaiah, and there are basically two main characters, the lover and the beloved, and there are a number of sort of voices off. There's Watchmen and Daughters of Jerusalem and blah, blah. And it's an incredibly obscure book. You read it and you think, I have no idea what this is about. You can read it 100 times and still have no idea what it's about. But interestingly, it's had more commentaries written on it than practically any other book in the Bible. And for 1,800 of the last 2,000 years, no one really disputed that it was about us and Jesus. It's only in the last 200 years that that's changed. And I think it's changed for a reason. I think the enemy, it has effectively been decanonized. I mean, I don't know, when did you last hear it preached on in church? Yeah, never. It's never preached on. It has been effectively decanonized. Maybe here you preach on it. There you go. Big hand for yeah, absolutely. But in the wider church, it has been effectively decanonized. Even Spurgeon preached 63 sermons on the song. Bernard of Clairvaux, who you've probably never heard of, but is a superhero of mine, he lived in he was operating around the 1150s. That's a long time ago. He preached 81 sermons on the first 2 chapters. It's pretty good, isn't it? So the song for me is like Romans in the New Testament is the song is to the Old Testament. So let me explain. Romans is effectively the sort of intellectual key to the New Testament. It explains how Jesus relates to all the Old Testament promises. It gives you a kind of logical structure to understand the New Testament. Okay? Is that news to you? No. Good, you knew that. All right. So the song is the emotional key to all of Scripture. Because if it weren't for the song, we would have no language for mystical. We would have no language for how we relate to God in a mystical, emotional way. It's what gives us that language, and it gives us permission to relate to God in a completely different way, which I'll come to in a second. So, just to prove to you that I'm not totally barking, I just want to quote a few other people that have seen this. So there's a very famous Jewish rabbi called Akiva, who lived about 100 AD-ish, 50 to 135. And he says this rather remarkable thing about the song. He says, the greatest day ever was the one on which Israel received the Song of Songs. All the writings in the Bible are holy. He's talking about the Old Testament, obviously. But the Song of Songs is the holiest of holies. Is that not an amazing thing? And if you think about it, he's writing about it, say, 120 AD. The temple had been destroyed in his lifetime, and he's saying that the song is the equivalent of the temple. It's a pretty remarkable thing. Thomas Aquinas, you've probably heard of but have no idea who he was. He was sort of 13th century. He wrote a thing called the Summa Theologiae. He's generally regarded as the sort of cleverest bloke who ever wrote Christian stuff. And he, at the end of his life, he had a vision, sort of a kind of a encounter, I think we'd call it these days. Yes, even Thomas Aquinas had an encounter. And a few months later, he was taken ill, and he was dying at an abbey called Fossa Nuova, and he asked that the song be read to him from beginning to end. And as he was dying, he dictated a commentary on the song. The Puritan John Owen, who's my theological hero, Hudson Taylor, Charles Spurgeon, blah, 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 you know, on and on. So, how are we doing time-wise? I don't want to go on too long about this. So why is it... I think it's important to recognize that it has been under attack, because intimacy has been under attack. And I think the Lord wants us to restore that place. He wants to restore that place. So the thing that I was really quite undermined, because when you read sort of anything other than the most amateur commentaries, they all go with the modern interpretation. And I want to give you just 2 or 3 reasons why I now know they're wrong. And I owe this to a wonderful lady who's just died, unfortunately, called Edme Kingsmill, who spent her life studying this. And she was a nun in Oxford, and I would recommend her commentary to you, that apart from the fact that it costs £90. That's Oxford University Press for you. Anyway, and she basically looked at the song all her life, because she too had an experience like this, and she basically spent her life studying the song and all the surrounding literature. And I'll just give you 2 of the reasons she gives as to why we can be absolutely sure that the intention of the writer of the song was that it was about Jesus, about God. The writer was obviously before Jesus, about God and us. And the first one is this, that he uses the word for the beloved, e.g. the male character, the Hebrew word daudi, okay, and it's used 26 times in the song. And it's only used in one other place in the Old Testament. And that place is Isaiah 5:1, and it says this: "Let me sing for my beloved my love song concerning his vineyard." Okay, and that is quite clearly about God. And the writer of the song is basically saying, this is the key. I'm handing you the key to interpretation of this book. The other interesting thing is that the word daudi comes 26 times in the song. And as you may or may not know, Hebrew counts in letters. And the Hebrew word that counts up to 26 is, and it's well, apparently Jews know this, is Yahweh. Isn't that cool? There are lots of other, there are loads of other things. I mean, there are, here's another good one. I'll just do a few quick ones because they're quite fun. So a lot of them come from John's Gospel, interestingly. John, in the story of Mary breaking the alabaster jar, the word he uses for perfume is nardos, which is the same word as used in the Septuagint version of the song, "When the king was on his couch, my nard gave forth its fragrance." Another one. This is just to show that the New Testament writers got this, okay? When Paul talks about husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, and so on and so on, might present to the church himself in splendor without spot or wrinkle. The word he's using for blemish, spot, wrinkle, is amamos, which is the same word, again, in the Septuagint that comes in the song, "You are all fair, my companion, and in you there is no blemish." Amamos, same word. So Paul is picking up that word because it's not used anywhere else. He's picking up that word and giving us a reference back to the song. I can go on and on and on about this. I'm sorry, it's sort of... But it's kind of worth having this, because when you start to really assert this, you will find quite quickly people tell you you're talking rubbish. And I want you to know that you're not talking rubbish. It's the real thing. So what I think the song does is it allows us to set our expectations of what an intimate relationship with God can be and is allowed and is expected. And that I think is the special thing about it. I think also there's losing the song from the canon, we have lost an understanding. I think it's linked to the fact that we've lost an understanding of eros, human eros. I think it's linked to the fact that we misunderstand gender. Anyway, I haven't got time to do all those things. I think it's... if you read commentaries about this stuff... actually, we were talking about it at lunchtime. Again, we had a big conversation at lunchtime, you can tell. Alan was saying, is it true that Jewish boys under 14 weren't allowed to study the Song of Songs? And it's sort of true, is the answer. But I think there is understanding of God's eros gives us an understanding of human eros. And in Alcoholics Anonymous, you know that, I don't know if you do know this, but one of the key tenets of it is that you won't get better unless you invite a higher power to help you. And you would think that giving up control would give you less self-control. But of course what it actually does is give you more. And I think it's the same thing with this, that when we can put our passionate feelings into the context of our relationship with God, we actually end up with more self-control, not less. Okay, so let's read a tiny bit. We're only going to read a tiny bit because time ticks away. And it starts like this. The Song of Songs, which is Solomon, and the bride says, may he kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. It's my favourite verse in the whole Bible. Because this is us saying to God, may he kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. The kiss of the mouth is a picture of the way that God reveals and communicates himself to us. So, a human kiss communicates in a way that nothing else does. So, when I saw Gooby, I kissed her on the cheek. And a kiss on the cheek is affectionate, but a kiss on the mouth is a whole different thing. You'd have been a bit surprised by that. The kiss of the mouth imparts an understanding of the other person. It stirs up our hearts. It tells us and reassures us about how the other person feels about us. It satisfies and yet makes us long for more. The kiss of the Saviour's mouth is the Holy Spirit revealing to us the love of the Father and the love of the Son. It tells us, when we're kissed on the mouth, it tells us that we're loved. It's felt on the lips, but it's experienced in the heart. It speaks of affection as well as passion, of friendliness. Kisses don't communicate a sterile academic knowledge. It doesn't tell you stuff about the Septuagint and scholars in Egypt. It gives you understanding that's disorientating. I can't even say the word. Disorientating. It reorders our priorities. You can't even express it, what it does to you exactly. And it seems to me that without that, we never really have the confidence to give ourselves to Jesus completely. But when we're kissed, we know that it's safe to give ourselves to him, and it's the very thing that he wants to. There's no selfish reservations. The husband and wife share the same inheritance, the same table, the same home, the same marriage bed. They are flesh of each other's flesh. This is all quite amazing stuff, isn't it? You see, you don't get this in church on Sunday, do you? Maybe you will in future. Sometimes we don't dare ask for a kiss. If you notice how bold she is, may he kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. It's the first verse, for goodness sake. There's no introduction and no messing about. Do we dare to ask for that? We might be turned down. Sometimes we'd rather admire at a distance and sort of hope that Jesus thinks we're okay because we're serving well and doing all the right things, than to break the alabaster jar and be mocked by the other guests, or to be rejected by Jesus. I've got pages and pages of this stuff. I better stop. I'm on page 15. It doesn't end till page 24, so I don't think we're going to have time for that. I'll just give you... The song is such an amazing book. I do commend it to you. I'm just going to read you one little passage, which is one I absolutely love. It goes like this. How is your beloved better than others, most beautiful of women? How is your beloved better than others that you charge us so? My beloved is radiant and ruddy, outstanding among 10,000. This is describing Jesus. His head is purest gold. His hair is wavy and black as a raven. His eyes are like doves by water streams, washed in milk, mounted like jewels. And it goes on with the whole description, and it finishes, his mouth is sweetness itself, he's altogether lovely. This is my beloved, O daughters of Jerusalem. This is my friend. So you might go, what on earth is all that about? It's pretty odd stuff, some of it. His eyes are like doves by water streams, washed in milk, mounted like jewels. What on earth is that about? I mean, you can't even visualize that, can you? But there's stuff in here, which is, I'm just going to give you a couple of tiny examples. My beloved is radiant, okay, and ruddy, outstanding among 10,000. The word for radiant is leukos, and it's the word that the gospel writers use for Jesus' clothes when they're dazzling white at the Transfiguration. Ruddy, it just means red. And it's the colour of sin. So, my beloved is radiant, white, the colour of holiness, but also, and the word is Adom, A-D-O-M, roughly, which is effectively, which has the Song of Songs is full of these word plays. It's like Adam. So he's man, carries sin. Outstanding among 10,000, that's a reference to Daniel 7, about the 10,000 that there when the books were opened. The whole passage starts with this head of gold and finishes with the feet of gold. That's recalling the statue of Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel, do you remember? Which starts with the head of gold, but gradually as it goes down, you go to iron, bronze, iron, and then finally feet of clay. But in this, you start with a head of gold, and you get legs of marble on feet of gold again. It's going, Jesus is not like that. He's trustworthy from top to bottom, no feet of clay. His head is pure as gold. His hair is wavy and black as a raven. I love this. John Owen talks about how the black hair represents the thoughts of God, the myriad thoughts of God, which are black because they're indecipherable, inscrutable. You know, the depth of God's wisdom, and also how hair is like incredibly complicated, but when it's wavy, it all falls in order. And God's thoughts are like that. They're incredibly complex. He thinks about us all the time, but they're all in order. Isn't it lovely? Anyway, I can go on and on and on. I'm not gonna. I will stop because we need to do some stuff on the prophetic, don't we? Isn't that what we're here for? Something like this. But I suppose my point in talking to you about all of this is, if you're, like I was saying before, he is our reward. And if we'll spend time just learning how to love him and be loved by him, letting ourselves be loved by him, he will share pillow talk with us. And that's the prophetic. Okay? Good enough? Right. So now I suppose what are we going to do? Why don't we just take a moment and actually, why don't you just stand up, turn around and sit down again, and then we'll think what we're going to do next. Oh, look, these are nice pictures. I like these. That's cool. Okay, do you want to sit down again? Okay. So this is what we're going to do, okay? I kind of half got this. All right. What I want you to do is to just spend a moment with the Lord and to ask Him for one thing. What's the one thing that you need today? And I suspect some of you have been put back in touch with some things. And when you know what that one thing is, and you take as long as you like over this, when you know what that one thing is, would you stand up?